Only people who've met me.
Nice.
So how are things going as you're moving away from the two most important holidays this time of year, moving away from Halloween and getting into Thanksgiving?
Yeah, kind of crazy, right? It's just coming fast. I think, you know, Christmas will be here soon. I can't believe Thanksgiving is in what? That's like next week, right?
Oh, I thought it was the week after.
Oh, is it the last Thursday of the month?
I thought it was the fourth Thursday.
I think you're right. Yeah, it's not until the 28th. That's good. In my head for a minute
Okay.
I was thinking it was the 21st and I thought, good grief, but the first was a Friday, not a Thursday. So,
No, yeah,
yeah.
that's absurd. That's ridiculous. I think that I am going to do a class, and if nobody shows up, I'm just going to record it so you guys can watch it that week. But I want to get as much like this week and next week. I want to get make sure that people know what's going on, so that you can use that weekend if you want to catch up and stuff.
Yeah.
I think that'll be good. And we have some things that people turned in regarding color tiles, paper mache, and conceptual stuff. So that'll give us something to talk about, and which is really good. So what I would like to do today is I want to look at people's paper mache, look at people's cubes that they turned in. Then we're gonna watch the video that I talked about last time. I want to go through the contemporary processes quiz, and then we'll look at ready-mades and cocoon
Okay.
submissions. And I think that so it's going to have to go pretty quick, but and I should have covered some of this last week, but I thought it would have been really rude to have you guys watch me be sick on the video, because once it's on the internet, it's always on the internet, you
It's
know.
always there. Yep.
Yeah. All righty. If that sounds good to you, then we're gonna go ahead and go.
Sounds good.
All right. So I'm gonna share. Oh, just a second, I will. There we go. All right. There's a few of these to look at, and one thing that I notice on this is that some people have covered the base with paper mache, and others haven't. Nobody needed to, and that is something that I did not clarify. And when I talk about paper macheing the sculpture, I'm thinking this is the sculpture, and this is the presentation. And so that's something that I should clarify. But I think this person did really well. I would like to see a little bit more sanding just right through here, and I think it wouldn't take very much to just knock that down. And if you sand it and you cannot see the purple foam underneath, you don't need to cover it with paper mache again. Now, if there's something like this and the person sands it and you can see the foam underneath, just make a little if just make a little teeny bit of paper mache and just cover that with one little thing, and after it dries, sand it down. You don't have to coat the entire thing again. So does that make did I explain that pretty well? Okay, excellent. This is really a fun one. I think this is really engaging. What I'm seeing though is just a little bit of nicks here and there, and I would recommend that this person. This is one of those cases again where you can sand it down a bit, and you're not going to have to reapply paper mache. I think that's all it needs, just a little bit of sanding, and that'll be perfect. I'm going to go back and look at this. Christina, do you see what I'm talking about?
I do. Yeah,
Okay,
there's just a little bit of a lifted edge almost, or a,
right. Yeah, and that's all. That's all it is. Just
yeah,
a little
yeah.
teeny bit. And there's a couple different grits of sandpaper. I would just use the harshest grit and knock that down and smooth it out. The reason is that we are going to be applying paint and texture. We'll talk about that next week, but the final go around of this puppy is going to be applying paint, color, texture, all sorts of stuff, and we want to have it be a prepared surface to do that.
Okay.
Okay, looking at this, I think that this is really turned out well because I'm not seeing any of those lifted corners, anything like that. I really appreciate. I last week I talked about wrapping it around and wrapping it in on itself to hold it in place. Did you find that that was the most effective way to do it?
I did. I had to kind of do shorter. I couldn't go all the way around the entire thing because the inner edge would start to kind of pucker and wrinkle a little bit, even when I had a really thin strip of paper. And so I kind of went halfway around, and then from the inside with a new piece of paper went the other half, and until the edges overlapped each other on the sides so that the paper would stick to the other paper. But I went around it, around the center this way, like
Yeah,
that.
that's an excellent solution. That first layer, though, it does not stick to the foam, so it could be a massive headache.
Yeah,
And
it kept moving
this
around. It was hard. The first one was much harder.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a pain in the neck.
So on this, when I like rub my fingers over it, I can feel just the slightest bit of a seam in between the paper strips at this point. Is that sufficient for the texture that we'll apply, or do I need to get it smoother than that?
Well, we need two layers, and we need it smooth enough that you can apply the paint and everything like that. You don't have if this is big enough you catch your fingernail on it, that's one thing. If you can just feel it, it's a little bit of a difference. That's not a big deal. I
Okay.
would say the way that this looks to me, that this is ready to go.
Okay.
If
Great.
these are so heavy and thick that even if you apply paint, you'll see the heavy texture, then that would be a concern. But it doesn't
Okay.
appear that this would be doing that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
All right. I don't really care if it makes sense or not. I'm just asking that to be polite. I hope it does. All right, this is looking really good. The only thing I can see is puckering right there, puckering right here, and a little bit right there. So again, this is one of those things, maybe a little bit right here, where the person maybe just needs to sand it a little bit to get it smooth, and then it's good to go. But this is looking really good. Yeah, most of these are looking really good with just a tiny bit of sanding. Okay, this person, let's see if we can find. I think this looks really good because I don't see maybe right there, maybe right through here, a little bit of puckering right through there, just a little bit of sanding. That's looking good. Let's see if we can find the most recent one. Oh, yeah, on this one, they really caked on the glue or photographed it when it was still really wet. I would say that this really needs to be sanded well. And I'm thinking uh, curving the sandpaper a little bit so you can get into the smoother areas, or not smoother areas, but those interior curves. Um, I would say this needs to be sanded more to get that smooth. And this is going to be really sturdy though. This looks really good. I like this. I don't see any of the puckering, maybe a little bit right there, but this looks really good. What do you think?
I agree. It looks nice and smooth.
Yeah, that's nicely done. This looks really good too. I see maybe just a little bit of puckering right there, a little bit, but it also looks to me like that could just be that they already sanded it down. Like right through here, it's obvious this was already sanded down. This looks really good too. Are you seeing what I'm seeing?
I agree. Yeah, it looks like kind of the edges are a little bit roughed up with the sandpaper, but so it's probably just smoothed out. I really like this one.
Yeah, that turned out well. This one is a really fun shape. I like this. This is one where I think there's just a little bit of areas of sanding, like right through here, where the paper just kind of you have the edge coming up, and
Mhm.
that's all. And right here, there's some full exposed folds. They just need to be sanded down. And the easiest way to do something like this on those interior areas is to just take your sandpaper, the roughest sandpaper, and tightly coil it around like a pencil or something. Like maybe take a strip of it, coil it around a pencil, and use that size of a loop, and that will get in there and sand it down. That's looking really good. Yeah, so I'm seeing like right through here, right through here. All right. Those are looking really good. I'm really happy with how people are doing the paper mache. I think that turned well. I keep wanting to say plaster. When we were doing this, Jason and I originally were using having people get alabaster, carve it out of alabaster. That I think is for like a second year sculpture student because it is such a laborious process and you cannot afford to screw up. But with this, and then I had people bring in half-gallon containers and cast blocks of plaster. We just carved with plaster, and you couldn't take that home. I mean, it was powdery, nasty. It was horrible, and I had to write it in. You could not wear brown or black corduroy because people were wearing that, and the clothes are ruined because there's no way to get that plaster dust out. And so Jason found this high density foam, and he thought, well, let's do that. And we could only get it in 3-inch thick sheets, so that's why we cut it, glue it, and then you have the 6-inch thick block because the only way that we could afford to buy it was in the 3-inch thick sheets. And even though it does make a mess, it is clean up. It is um, clean upable. You can vacuum it, and it doesn't permanently destroy clothing like the plaster does. But what I am impressed with is this is the first semester that every single person heard me when I said organic, organic, organic. Everybody heard me. So everybody did curving edges. And there were some things where people would start and they would send photos where it still had the harsh edges on. But for the most part, everybody, well, everybody got that. And then for the most part, when they submitted things, that showed in what they were doing. So I really appreciate that. That very, I'm just really happy with what people submitted so far. And that kind of brings me into something else really quick. Um, there's still a lot of assignments that haven't been turned in. And I go through every week and put zeros on everything when we've passed the due date by a few days. That doesn't mean you've lost out and your parents should have thrown you away. What that means is that's supposed to trigger Canvas reminding you to turn the assignment in. The easiest way to get your grade up is to turn stuff in. Go through, turn in all the attendance video assignments, turn in all the artist response ones. You know, for each module, you're supposed to write a 3 to 5 paragraph essay about the artist that you saw. Turn that in, and then make sure that the work log is turned in. That's an easy way to bring the points up right away. And then just go through and respond to my comments. One person I sent a lot of comments to last week, they didn't respond to him at all. And then I realized that the system did not save any of the comments that I'd sent to him. So if you don't get a perfect score and I didn't tell you why, email me and let me know. Because usually it's just a matter of like a lot of the times it's going to be something like they didn't put the accessed on phrase at the end of a citation, or it's going to be something as silly as you only sent 2 out of the 3 photos that you had taken, and the third photo explains everything. So just keep in mind easy ways to increase your points. There is absolutely no reason that everybody in this class can't get an A. So Christine, is that your daughter over your shoulder? I'm going to have to charge her tuition too if she's going to sit in on the videos.
Oh, I'm sorry, my mic was muted. He said you're going to have to pay tuition if you're going to sit in on the video. She said she doesn't have any income.
Well, that's okay. The tuition is you get what you pay for anyway. So. Okay, now I'm going to shift gears and go to the color and texture tiles. And these again are things where if you don't get a perfect score, turn around and turn them back, just resubmit. You know, work on it, resubmit. Do you remember how many pieces I said were valid, but that you needed to have as a bare minimum on your color collages?
You need to have 6 cuts.
Okay. All right. Excellent. And with the texture, on this, I think there's some really interesting things going on. And this may be a case where somebody's going to have to tell me and explain what they did. Doing a flat sheet of foil on one side. One of the parameters is that each side should be represent 45 minutes of work. And with foil, one cool thing that you can do with foil is apply texture to it and put that on like that, or glue things down on the surface and then put the foil over it. So that I like these. I like what's going on here, but that side kind of it doesn't help me. Here though, it looks like there's a lot of work done to making this texture. It's a subtle texture, but there's work there. And I think that is just fine. One thing that I like about this is we can see 3 sides here, 3 sides here, go up, 3 different sides there, 3 different sides there. This one is really interesting. I don't see this one very clearly, but I really like what's going on with the textures. That's a great use of cardboard. Here I can see mostly, it looks like this person just needs to use another couple of pieces of paper to get that 6 minimum, and then these will be just fine. I think that these are looking nice. One of the reasons why we do these right here, one of the reasons we do 6 pieces of paper is because it is really easy to get into a trap where I'm just going to do the simple way out. And you guys are professional artists. For assignments like this, yes, they are simple, but don't do the simplest thing. It doesn't work. Shading is really good. If you're going to use solid pieces of color, shade with the solid pieces of color. Tear them into thumbnail sized pieces, feather it like that, and get the shading. So, you know, this looks like it's only 5 pieces. This looks like it's only 5 pieces. This looks like it's only 2. And these are cases where I would, and this is only 2 or 3. And these are cases where I would recommend applying more piece of paper than resubmitting. What do you think about these, Christina?
I really like those textures.
I think those turned out
Particularly
really.
the one on the top that's like coming towards us. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, these turned out really well.
Hmm.
What I am noticing too is as I get the workloads in, there is a one-to-one correspondence, direct correspondence to the value that I can see of the work being turned in and the time that was spent. And it's interesting because the more time somebody spends on these, the better they always look. Now this one is interesting. This is, I like this, but these kind of concern me because they don't seem to have a lot of the numbers, the number of pieces we talked about for the collage. Now for the texture, these almost look identical, but I don't know if you can tell. This has the top layer of cardboard torn off, so a little bit is remaining, and it's divided into 9 squares where they're rotating which direction the grain is. Here, the grain is going all the same way, and it looks like they pulled out the center and did it 4 different rows. So it looks very similar, but it's a very different process. And that's really fun to see. And I like this kind of thing where the person is kind of riffing on the same kind of idea for a texture, but doing
Hmm.
it, applying it differently. Like this one, you have all the strips are the same size and all are done with in the grain of the cardboard. And here the strips vary and they're done against the grain of the cardboard. So again, like this one, they're playing with an idea and just doing it differently, and I really like that. That is a lot of fun to see. What do you think about these?
Yeah, I agree with what you just said. I like that top cube, how it's like the same texture, but one is such a higher relief than the other.
Yeah, the one on the left is a much higher relief.
Hmm.
And one thing that I'm pleased with as well is that people know what I'm talking about when I'm saying, photograph on the corner, so we can see 3 sides at once.
Yeah.
Very, very nice. This side works. This side, it looks like it might work. It looks like there's 6 pieces there. There's only 3 pieces. Here, there's only 3 pieces. Here, there's only 3 pieces. This side works. So I think if this was done with multiple pieces, making each of these waveforms, that'd be kind of interesting. And again, with this, if this was done where like these 2 red pieces are taken off and this is made with multiple blue pieces and then red was put on again, something like that to bring up the piece count, that would work. I'm really liking this. I think this is
I really,
fantastic.
I
Yeah,
really like that too with the twine.
yeah. I think this is not an easy thing to do. It satisfies my OCD needs. So yeah, it works out really well. And I love what they've done here. This is, so you have a very simple shape, triangles, and in this case, squares, and they just put a whole bunch on. And this, you have a shade going from light to dark, and here it's mixed up. And I really like that juxtaposition.
Hmm.
And I think this turned out really well too. It looks though that there's only like 5 pieces here, unless there's 2 pieces right there. This one, there's only 4 pieces here, but everything else is looking really good. Here, I really like how they carved the top off, and then you have the spiral string here, little teeny tiny rolls. This is a pain in the neck. These are only like a 1/4 inch in diameter, or 3/8 in diameter, but it is a massive pain in the neck to roll them up that tightly so that they're all the same shape and size.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really, that rope spiral really works out, particularly when we consider that these are short pieces right here because they cut off the edge.
Mm-hmm. It's very nicely, tightly woven too. It looks really nice.
Yeah, that turned out well. Okay, now this is a case where I only see
There
one.
are more pieces there, but the yellow overlaps and the red overlaps.
Okay, all
So
right.
there are 6 pieces there, but I can totally see how it doesn't look like it.
So in that case, if I give you some missed points and I point this out, then you would turn around, let me know, and you'd email me, put a comment in the comment thing on the assignment,
Okay.
and then you would email me and tell me, hey, this there actually were 6 pieces there.
Okay.
And then I'd go in and fix the grade. These are really fascinating. I love this kind of thing where we have like just pieces overlapped, and then here the pieces have one layer removed and are overlapped. That's really fun. And just careful. What is interesting, more interesting about this than if you just crumpled it up and stuck a glob of crumpled cardboard on it, is that you have smoothed this out so the surface is about an even height from the supporting surface. The average height is pretty even. That's what I like because it demonstrates that you're doing it on purpose. So I really appreciate that. Okay, and this is very, very similar to this, with the difference being that this is at a diagonal and this is not. And then this is really fun where it looks like you bent a lot of the cardboard and just put it in different areas so it feels like there's all these kind of squat pyramid things going everywhere. I think that turned out really interesting. And this is fascinating too, two different layers. And for the color, I like this with the overlapping squares and the overlapping triangles. This looks like it goes in. Is that just a factor of the color?
It is. Yeah.
That's really fascinating. I really like that this person, um, what's her, Louise Neville, she went the Louise Neville route and painted these all the same color. I like that. That's kind of fun because then you can really see the texture. And this is also fun because this texture is kind of similar to this texture. This texture seems to be kind of talking to this texture because from if you just looked face on, the designs would be very similar, but this is completely different when you see it at an angle, and that's fun to see. And I like how they made these. That's a lot of fun to see. That turned out that turned out well. This is fun. I love when people do like long strings and then make the collage like that, just because I know what a pain in the butt it is. And this is kind of interesting. I love this. I love this. This just looks like stacked paper, but when it's a consistent height, it doesn't feel like it was just accidental. And this is a lot more interesting treatment of the foil than just having a flat uh, plane of foil. And I really like this texture where it looks like candy wrappers. I love what they did with the glue. That turned out really nice. Again, lots of different shapes and stuff like that with the collage. I think those turned out well. What do you think about these?
I like them. I was just laughing at how similar a couple of her color sides are to mine. We should
Yeah.
have gotten together and saved some time cutting out circles together.
Or at least
I
check
like
the
the
person going
texture
daddy.
with it looks like popsicle sticks, maybe.
Yes, right here.
I like that texture quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's fun to see that she used um, several different colors of skewers, and then some of the popsicle sticks. It almost looks like a palette because of the way they are. And then once she's established that rhythm, she starts playing against the rhythm, and I
Hmm.
really like that. That turned out well. This one, I think I'm going to have the person resubmit with a couple more photos so I can see this top area. And I like doing this where they make the circle, the loops with tape. That's really kind of fun to see. And then kind of weaving a little bit with the tape on a diagonal. Those are interesting. This is fascinating. I'm not really happy with this one because these two they completely covered the cardboard surface with the paper color, and this you can see a lot of the cardboard. This feels like it's just reworking this, so I'm not happy with that side. Particularly when you look at all the others, like this, they'll need another piece of paper here. Looks like they'll need another piece of paper here. But you see the other five sides of this cube all have the entire surface covered with colored paper. This is the only one that's not. And so that's a little problematic to me. And then the fact that I can't see right here, I can't see right here, kind of bothers me. This one is a little bit tough as well because the all of these sides are supposed to be 4 inches by 4 inches, and these look pretty consistent, but these don't. So I think the person needs to maybe reattach these so that we can see that they're even, and then rephotograph them so that this corner is in the center of the frame and we can see all three sides at the same time. And I would this side probably needs to be or does need to be readdressed as well. But I like the fact that they're just doing some really interesting. This is very pop art style abstract. I think this needs to be have a couple extra pieces of paper in it. And then I'm also noticing I'm only seeing five sides. I'm missing one because this is the same as this,
Mm.
and it looks like it's the same right here. So this person needs to go back and revisit this so we can see all six sides. Okay, the crumpled paper thing again. This it does become problematic when it just looks like it's wadded up and stuck on the side. I think this is a really good solution for the crumpling up of the foil because you can tell it's trimmed to fit the size of the cube. This I think is okay, but this would be even if they did alcohol inks and used a couple different shades of brown and alternated, that would be really make it a lot more interesting. These I think turned out well. I really like this one. I think this turned out well. This is kind of I really like this is kind of satisfying OCD wise. This is interesting. This I think is a really good start, but to finish it off, these green should come all the way to the edges, all the way around, and make it otherwise it looks like it's just a presentation for this. Like this is yeah, it stops right there, but it fills up the whole side. This doesn't. So that's something that I think should be addressed. Are you, Christina? Are you seeing the things I'm seeing?
Yeah, I see
Okay,
your point.
excellent. Again, Louise Neville. Really, I like that. I love that because then these textures become a lot more intriguing. This may be just something crumbled up and watered and stuck to the side, but when it's all painted like that, it feels entirely on purpose.
Hmm.
And I love this texture. That's something else that I think is really fascinating. It looks to me like the person made designs with glue and then they put sand on it and then painted over it. Whatever they did, it's really intriguing. I think that's fascinating. And I love how this side right here mirrors this side a lot. They're not the same, but if you saw them in isolation, you'd be forgiven for thinking that they were. And this almost looks like cornflakes or something. These collages are really interesting to me because, again, tiny pieces, really, really fascinating stuff. I think I like these two, the red and blue here. Those two I think are my favorite out of all of these. What do you think about these four?
I think they're very well done. I really like the black texture cube. I think it really elevates the macaroni, which would look much more boring in its natural color.
Yeah, yeah. It makes it feel like it's crafted and entirely on purpose. I think, yeah, I think that turned out. I really like what they're doing with the color collages, but again, it like this one I think satisfies the requirements. This you can still see the cardboard through, and I'm not really happy with that. And these, I think that this person is doing a really good job. All this would take would be taking these off, putting down a piece of paper that fits in with the color schemes that they've established, and then gluing them back down again. And that would solve the issue. I think I really love this texture in particular. I think that that's really fascinating. Here, the interesting thing is, if this was applied so you'd see the cardboard around the edges, it would feel like it wasn't the person didn't try really hard. But when you're doing this, you're leaving bare spots, and it's like you're drawing an image with them. That's totally different. It feels like it's intentful. This, I think, would be really fascinating if it went all the way to the edge and looked like it was sheared off. Same with this, and it would just take a couple more pieces of garbage. But I think that these textures are really, really interesting. All right, what do you think about these?
I really like the colors and textures that they have going on, but I agree that it looks more intentional and finished when it goes all the way to the edges or when you can't see the cardboard.
Yeah,
Because I want to think about the colors and the textures and not think about the cardboard cube.
right. Yeah, very good. All right, excellent. So that's that one. All right, I hope that everybody understands this. I feel that people are getting it. It does seem to me that sometimes we get in a rush, want to turn things in, and that's totally fine because since we don't meet twice a week while we're in the body and I can look at your progress and say stuff, it is completely fine to go back, rework stuff, and resubmit it. I mean, that's how this class, that's how I've designed this class, so everybody can do that. I want it to be interactive. I want you to be able to respond to um, perspective shifts and things like that. And even if you think you need to go back now and you had a great idea for another image on your house project, you can even submit that if you wanted to. You don't need, most people don't need to. I think we're all done with that. But yeah, for anything, if you don't get a perfect score, go back, look at my direction, resubmit. If I didn't give any direction, email me and ask what's going on, because that just sometimes I've hit all the right buttons as far as I can see, but it does. This is something that I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but every once in a while, Canvas will even show me on the screen that it was submitted, and I'll go on and it disappears. I try to work directly from the assignment submission area because if I go to the grading page, that happens all the time. It doesn't change things. And I can shift things around in the assignments and reorder stuff and things like that, and come back 10 minutes later and it's reordered it back in the previous way. So my brother is friends with the guy who designed Canvas, and it is absolutely astounding for what it is. But there's just little things like that, little glitches. If that, so try really hard not to get upset. If that's what happens, just let me know. I do have a couple students in other classes that will write. You know how sometimes it's hard to know sarcasm in text.
Yeah.
When somebody is being intentionally rude, it is kind of obvious to see. And people have written that like I'm an idiot for not catching it. And in that case, my priority to regrade their resubmission goes right to the bottom of the file.
Yeah, that's
And,
understandable.
and I'm not inclined to give any benefit of the doubt, if somebody wants to be rude. And I have found out, Jason has told me that there's been students that have wanted other teachers to regrade their assignments in the past. And it doesn't matter who the other teacher is. And there's 6 other teachers that are doing this class as well. They always grade lower. So, keep that in mind. If you decide that you don't want to listen and you don't want to turn in the assignment, and you're going to be pissy instead of just letting me know that there was a mistake, then there's other routes that you can go, but they're not going to make you as happy as you could be. Sadly, that's the way it is. All righty. Okay, so we have about 45 minutes. Remember our conversation last week, and Christina, you are representing the entire body of the class.
Great.
Don't feel any pressure whatsoever, other than that what you want to put on yourself. We talked last week about where conceptualism was, and people have turned stuff in, and I want to look at them. We're going to talk about them briefly. And if you are one of the people that already turned it, and I'm saying this to whoever listened to this, if you're one of the people who have turned stuff in and I'm talking about it and I'm saying we need to change things here and there, it is not in any way a personal critique. I'm just talking about ways to understand the assignment better, and this is what's intended to approach the assignment better. I really appreciate when people are willing to turn stuff in early, because that gives us something to talk about. And 9 times out of 10, everything's going to be fine. But every once in a while, that may also mean that you're going to say, oh, yeah, okay, I need to go back and redo that. Redo it. It doesn't make it is totally fine. I would love to regrade your assignment and give you more points. So I'll just say that. All right, so we are going to go to this. In case YouTube edits this out of tonight's class discussion, I have included a link directly to this video in the attendance. And in either case, what you will need to do to be counted for attendance for this week is 4 things you learned from our conversation, and then 1 thing that you learned from watching this 4-minute and 32-second video. All right? Almost anything is bearable for 4 minutes and 32 seconds. I was going to say something as atrocious as twice as long as a Mormon's honeymoon, but I will not. I don't want to. I think that'd be terrible. So I'm not going to say that. Okay. You can see this, right?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. So remember, you'll need to write down 1 thing that you learned from this 4-minute, 32-second video.
Okay.
What is reality? Knowledge, the meaning of life. Big topics you might tackle figuratively, explaining existence as a journey down a road or across an ocean. a climb, a war, a book, a thread, a game, a window of opportunity, or an all too short-lived flicker of flame. 2,400 years ago, one of history's most famous thinkers said life is like being chained up in a cave, forced to watch shadows flitting across a stone wall. Pretty cheery, right? That's actually what Plato suggested in his Allegory of the Cave, found in Book 7 of the Republic, in which the Greek philosopher envisioned the ideal society by examining concepts like justice, truth, and beauty. In the allegory, a group of prisoners have been confined in a cavern since birth with no knowledge of the outside world. They are chained facing a wall, unable to turn their heads, while a fire behind them gives off a faint light. Occasionally, people pass by the fire carrying figures of animals and other objects that cast shadows on the wall. The prisoners name and classify these illusions, believing they're perceiving actual entities. Suddenly, one prisoner is freed and brought outside for the first time. The sunlight hurts his eyes, and he finds the new environment disorienting. When told that the things around him are real, while the shadows were mere reflections, he cannot believe it. The shadows appeared much clearer to him, but gradually his eyes adjust until he can look at reflections in the water, at objects directly, and finally at the sun, whose light is the ultimate source of everything he has seen. The prisoner returns to the cave to share his discovery, but he is no longer used to the darkness and has a hard time seeing the shadows on the wall. The other prisoners think the journey has made him stupid and blind and violently resist any attempts to free them. Plato introduces this passage as an analogy of what it's like to be a philosopher trying to educate the public. Most people are not just comfortable in their ignorance, but hostile to anyone who points it out. In fact, the real-life Socrates was sentenced to death by the Athenian government for disrupting the social order, and his student Plato spends much of the Republic disparaging Athenian democracy, while promoting rule by philosopher kings. With the cave parable, Plato may be arguing that the masses are too stubborn and ignorant to govern themselves. But the allegory has captured imaginations for 2,400 years because it can be read in far more ways. Importantly, the allegory is connected to the theory of forms developed in Plato's other dialogues, which holds that, like the shadows on the wall, things in the physical world are flawed reflections of ideal forms, such as roundness or beauty. In this way, the cave leads to many fundamental questions, including the origin of knowledge, the problem of representation, and the nature of reality itself. For theologians, the ideal forms exist in the mind of a creator. For philosophers of language viewing the forms as linguistic concepts, the theory illustrates the problem of grouping concrete things under abstract terms. And others still wonder whether we can really know that the things outside the cave are any more real than the shadows. As we go about our lives, can we be confident in what we think we know? Perhaps one day a glimmer of light may punch a hole in your most basic assumptions. Will you break free to struggle towards the light, even if it costs you your friends and family? Or stick with comfortable and familiar illusions? Truth or habit? Light or shadow? Hard choices, but if it's any consolation, you're not alone. There are lots of us down here.
I really like that video. It really encapsulates this idea very well. And what's fascinating to me is that we attribute this to Plato, but it has been something that there's evidence of in every society that has a spiritual component to it that's left records of itself. There is this awareness that there are multiple layers to reality. And we navigate the layer we live in presently with reference to these other layers. I think in India, one of those layers is prana. In Australia, it's dream time. You know, and in North America, that layer was uh, time before. You know, we get a lot of these kinds of things, ideas throughout different cultures, and it even shows up in how people uh, create medicine historically and different things like that. Like there is this ideal way that your body should function, and in historical societies, the medicine is designed not to fix the symptom like it is in contemporary Western medicine, but to get your body back to that ideal. Which I think it doesn't seem like that would make a lot of difference, but it is a subtle shift that is also, I think, pretty profound thinking wise. And that whole concept is really important to think about as we go into contemporary processes when we're talking about performance art and conceptual work and all these kinds of things. Because again, well, all these other artists are creating a final product using paint or clay or wood, the person who is doing a performance piece, a person who's making conceptual work, is their final product is what they're using those other tools to sculpt in your brain. And I just kind of love that idea. And it is important in a 3D design class because 3D design is anything that's, I think, off the confines of the page or the screen. So that's pretty important. And we can see when we go back and think about the 1 and 3 chairs by Joseph Kosuth. On one hand, we can say the one chair refers to the solid chair, but even that doesn't quite really fit because we encounter that piece through a photo. But maybe the one chair he's talking about is this world of the real, this ideal chair that somehow we use in our mind to compare every chair to. And so in that case, those three different depictions, the physical chair, the photo of a chair, and the description of a chair are all equally on the same level and that false shadow of a chair because they all refer to that ideal. And I love that kind of mind screwing, that goes on. That's what the Dadaists were really doing. Uh, Duchamp, Picasso, and Braque really started kind of doing that as an engagement with the audience. The Impressionists started doing that just by expressing what they were seeing as different to using only shared symbols. And then you look at the Cubists, and they're really starting to go at this idea that multiple perspectives, multiple perceptions are fine because they're all related to this ideal. Do you remember when I said that there's a phrase a lot of people fall back on, thinking that we know what it means, which is beauty is in the eye of the beholder. That how long has art existed? Human-made art. How long has that existed? The oldest tools in
Probably
the
as long
world.
as humans, almost.
Yeah, the oldest tools in the world are 1 million years old. They were found in China. You get Adam's calendar, which looks like the oldest architectural structure in the world, is found in South Africa, and that's like 0.8 million years old. As long as humans have been able to manipulate things, they've been making art. That's what we're driven to do. We can't help it. And but that phrase, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, has only been around for a little over 200 years, which I think is important to realize, that we can't separate a thing or a final piece of something as being what it is with we can't separate that from the participation of observers deciding what it is. But we can separate what it is from our evaluation of it. Which, I mean, part of our reacting to it is what makes the art the art. But something is going to be beautiful regardless of if there's anybody there to observe it. It only truly becomes art when a circuit is finished, when we're able to look at it, respond to it, and then start making a cycle where we're responding to it, and then we start responding to our image of it, and it's no longer the thing by itself. Now it's the thing within the community of thought that we've created by becoming an observer. That's probably something that people aren't going to really understand, but something is just going to be a thing when you encounter it, look at it, and respond to it as a human being. It doesn't matter how you respond to it, but when you respond to it as a human being, that's the moment that it becomes art, because we're participating. And the thing in itself, if it goes out of the room, the art is still there because now we're responding to our thoughts of the thing. So we're still being related to it. But if I decide that it's beautiful and you decide that it's atrocious, that doesn't change whether or not it is beautiful or atrocious. All that it is we're evaluating it. And people think that that idea of beauty in the eye of the beholder is something that Shakespeare referred to when he said a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. That's not. It's the exact opposite. What he's saying is it doesn't matter how you observe. It doesn't matter what your reaction to something is. It's still the thing. The rose is still going to be the king of cultured flowers, whether or not you like it. So that's something that's really, it's really worth pondering that for a little bit as we look at more contemporary work, because those kinds of questions about where the meaning of the art exists, where the validity of the art resides, and that participation with viewers in the audience, that is what contemporary art is really wrapped up in. All of our stuff, you complete a digital image, and it's not really fully complete until somebody sees it. And it could be that the viewership is one, it's just you, and then you erase it. But still, you were there to see it, to view it. And then it starts becoming something completely new and growing as people look at it and respond to it. The object itself stays what it is, but the artfulness of the object residing in that community of viewership and human response to the thing, that's the element of the art that starts changing, I think. Does that kind of make sense? Do you understand what I'm talking about?
I do. I've never really given it much thought, but I like your thoughts on it. It's making me consider it in a way that I had not before.
Well, I think what's so fantastic about this perception, this awareness of what art truly is we can look at absolutely anything. Yinka Shonobara is one of my favorite artists in the whole wide world. He is amazing. He's confined to a wheelchair. He does these fantastic blends of high Rococo and Baroque French culture with contemporary Ghanaian and Western African society. It's incredibly intense, absolutely gorgeous. There's several painters that do this. There's fantastic people that do this all the time. But what I think is so amazing about Yinka is that he knows where the art resides. He builds because he wants you to become engaged and responsible in the process of building art beyond what the object is. And at any point in time, even though he has intelligent people in between him and me, so I can't approach him directly, I can talk to him anytime I want just by pulling up an image or pulling up a memory of the stuff that he's done. I know he has a sense of humor. I know he has OCD. I know he has an intellectual curiosity that I find is fascinating. And even though I'm not talking to him, the physical person in the real world, I'm communicating with his avatar, and I can have really good conversations. I know that it's all in my mind, it's all in my imagination, but that's the power of art. At any point in time, we can go and look at Van Gogh, and we can see the struggle that he went through transforming his mental illness into beautiful things. Whether or not you like Van Gogh, I don't care. But there's a magic there that he's recorded, he's journaled his journey for us to walk into. I just think that that's astounding. Or you look at a red letter vase from ancient Greece, or you look at any of the ossuary box, decorative ossuary boxes from Jerusalem, or you look at Yoruba bronze, you look at Mayan wall painting. It doesn't matter what you're looking at. We can communicate with those people. Or uh, Indigenous Australians, the X-ray paintings. We can, if we know anything at all about the dream time, that informs the art so heavily. Once you start seeing those paintings, I think Steve Martin has one of the largest collections, private collections in North America of original Indigenous, Australian Indigenous work. Once you understand that, it becomes transformative. Or you look at Rothko, who did the big sheets of color and paint, and realize he is trying to help you find calmness in a society that invented the ulcers. Post World War II United States invented the bleeding ulcer because we were so consumed by constant stress, worrying about the bomb, worrying about buying the right thing for our family, having the right colors in our home, uh, and worrying about the Cold War. Is our neighbor a commie? Is our kid a commie? And Mark Rothko responded to that with this transcendent beauty, asking you to just lose yourself in meditation on color. These kinds of things I think are absolutely magical.
Will you tell me the name of one of your favorite artists again? It was Yinka.
Yinka Shonibara.
Okay, thank you.
He has lots of stuff on YouTube. It's pretty amazing. Now I think that we may, I don't know how fast we'll be able to go through this quiz, and I'm looking at it. I think what I want to do is talk about a couple things. I'm just going to talk about a couple questions, and then we can go back over the quiz again next week.
Okay.
I think that's what I'll do, if that's okay. Because I waxed poetic for about 10 minutes longer than I expected. But does all that, what I was saying, does that make sense? Do you understand
It does.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you guys create as artists, it may be in your role as a graphic designer and you think you're just following directions to please the customer. You have still created something that they've never seen before. And whatever they remember of you as an individual, they're always going to have a piece of your presence with them for the rest of their lives. So, it's something to think about. It's on the order of the same kind of, it can be on the order of the same kind of mental wackiness as when I was a little kid. Right around kindergarten, I discovered showers and I thought they were absolutely amazing. And then I remember in Sunday school, the idea of God being omnipresent and all aware. It dawned on me that meant that he could see me taking a shower. And I did not like that at all. So don't go down that route of overthinking silliness, please. But now, as we look at this, all of you guys have expertise in 2D work and digital work. This should not be a challenge for you at all. Refer to the text in the reading, and the text is chapters 9 and 11, and this will talk about that in there as well. The two that people get hung up on are simultaneous contrast, and that is defined very clearly in the text. If you're having a hard time finding it in chapters 9 and 11, go back and look in the index in the back, and it will take you right to the page. And then subtractive color mixing. This is counterintuitive. What is your medium of choice, Christina?
I'm studying graphic design here. I enjoy watercolor.
Okay, because watercolor is a good example of subtractive color mixing that shows the irony of the name, I think. Because subtractive color mixing, every time you apply a pigment, you are removing all the color except for the spectrum that bounces back in the form of the pigment. Of what you see, what your brain registers as the color being shown in the pigment. So for example, if there's 7 colors in the rainbow and you apply blue pigment, that has subtracted all colors except for the blue portion of the rainbow that's bouncing back at you. And so when you apply different pigments, each of them are subtracting everything else other than what the pigment is showing. And so when you mix them together, that is what is subtractive color mixing. And it's I love talking about that with watercolor, because watercolor by its nature is most effective when it's a translucent medium. And you want the light to bounce back, but when you see the pigment there, it's a solid pigment that is still subtracting out the rest of the color spectrum. Now, an additive color spectrum, color mixing is going to be like James Turrell. When he does his color collages on the walls, he's shining different beams of colored light, and he's making new colors with that. That you're not taking anything away because there's no pigment. It is just the focused color of the light. So that's additive. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Those are the two most inconvenient ones. And then Roy G. Biv, you'll get a crisp high five. You can tell me how old he is. Do you know who Roy G. Biv is?
I don't.
I'll give you a hint. Red, orange, yellow. Can you guess how old he is?
Yeah. Forever?
Yeah,
Infinitely?
he's about 17 billion years old.
Yeah, that's funny.
And then talking about ready-made, we are talking about that in some of the things we're talking about. Marcel Duchamp is the king. He worked in at least 12 different distinct art movements and was spectacular in each of them. But read about him, find out more about him. He's amazing. And this just talks about there are several different reasons to use found materials to make art. One of the more common ones is cheap. I like when I do assemblage, I love going to antique stores and cast off shops, DI, stuff like that. I love finding objects with a happy ghost attached to them. And happy ghosts for the most part are the memories that we associate with things that give them personality. That's how most ghosts are. And we call them ghosts because that's how our mind relates it to us. And so when I talk about happy ghosts, I'll go and find a glass vase that was made in the 1800s. And there's a little corner dinged off here. It's really worn down with use there. Demonstrates that somebody loved it. And so there it was used by happy ghosts. And so that's why I like using assemblage stuff. Now, on this one, question 5, this is a hint to help. Look at how these are spelled. Now you have 8 different options here and 7 different opportunities. Use each one only once, and you will have 1 left over. Okay, does that help?
Yeah.
All right. and the computer will ding it wrong if you misspell it. I will go back through and correct it when I go back and grade it. Now this, really think about applied or natural. Now in this one, this is just natural wear and tear. This, do you think this is applied or natural?
Applied.
Absolutely. Now this one, even though Andy Goldsworthy is using natural material, is this applied or natural?
He's applied the natural material to achieve that effect.
Yes. Excellent. Very good. Now I do want to talk about these two things. John Chamberlain liked taking metal garbage, like crashed up cars and stuff like that, and he loved exploring balance and color intrigue and drama, those ideas, trying to get away as much as possible from references to shared symbolism. So he was very much a formalist sculptor. He would use non sequitur color application. And even though you know that these are cans that food once was in, there's absolutely no reference to that here. He's just working with shapes. Now, one of my favorite artists in the entire universe, Betty Saar, I love her to death. I wish she was my grandma. She made this. This is these are both assemblage pieces. And what she is doing, I think, is just absolutely astounding. She takes objects that other people discard, she puts them together in a way that forces you. Well, you can just look at it and laugh and move on if you want. But if you take a moment to look at it and start thinking about where these pieces came from, what do they represent, what do they mean, she is really, really good at taking imagery that was intended, very purposely intended, to dehumanize the subject matter and make it empowering. And I love it. And I mean, it does appear on the surface to be very ethnocentric, but it isn't. It applies to everybody. And I think that that's what's so beautiful about her work. She's working on at least 3 different levels. One is the object is as it is, and it's just moment, a subsection of history. The symbolism empowers the subject matter. And then on the 3rd level, she is talking about reassessing misuse or misapplied symbols for anybody. When anybody thinks of you as different than what you really are, and discards you for who because they don't know you, you look at her work and it allows you. It gives you permission to say to yourself, "No, I'm worth more than that." And that's everything that she does, and I think it's absolutely beautiful. So I love this. I introduced my youngest was born in Zimbabwe, and I love introducing her to Betty Saar because she just got excited, seeing this beautiful work. And one of my students came from California originally, and she did her artist research on Betty Saar. And when she was presenting it, I remember she was crying. She said, "I had no idea that somebody who looked like me was so powerful." And I thought that was beautiful.
That is really cool.
And then I love Fran Crow. What is this? This is just garbage that was cast up on shore. And look at how she's presented it. Have you ever been to a tourist trap town? I love what Fran Crow does because she has this really nasty streak to her where she's using a sense of humor and our thoughtless, shallow expectations as tourists to really kind of twist the environmental knife just a little bit in the wound. And I love what she does. I love Tim Burton. I love Nightmare Before Christmas. I love Paranorman. I love all that kind of stuff where it's kind of spooky, it's a little bit dark, and it's funny. Addams Family, all that is great. And I think she's a humorist in the same kind of order, where it's not intended to make you slap your knee and laugh, but she is talking about a very serious issue using language that kind of allows us to drop our guard a little bit. And I think that is just really well done. And then this last one, George Siegel has done some really emotionally wrenching work. And this is an example just of two things that are almost identical, but notice how he uses color. And I think it's absolutely fascinating. And what's really fascinating to me is when people talk about this, when they write their short sentences about it, you can kind of tell how they feel about these colors themselves, because that communicates a lot, that it contributes a lot towards how they communicate.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Now, we do this. We're talking about ready-mades and conceptual. Ready-made is when you do stuff like, and it's not assemblage. Assemblage is the next step, but ready-made is when you take things and present them in a completely new context, and you really force people to reevaluate their relationship with their understanding of things like art and creativity, as well as look at things in a completely new light. And so for this assignment, I want you to do that with something that's already made, and then make a really good photo of what it is, and then 3 paragraphs, talk about it with the title, what it means, and why this is justified as art now. And this is more an intellectual exercise, giving you an opportunity to kind of explore the idea of the ready-made. And I think I haven't read this all the way, but I think I would like to suggest to Mary that she change this to just anagram, as a single word. But I'll read through there, and I challenge everybody else, read through this and see what you think about it, because it may be as we read it, that title is absolutely perfect. And this would be an example where if you don't agree with your final grade, or you don't agree with what I think about it, let me know. So I think it's interesting. And what she does say is, she has art right there. So maybe the title is really good. So, it's something to think about. One of my students who absolutely hated the idea of conceptual and thought it was a waste of time, conceptual art, what she did was, we talked about our project, and she got some ideas that she thought would demonstrate how stupid the idea of conceptual art was. What she did was she set a budget of $10, went to Deseret Industries and bought $10 worth of junk, as many pieces as she could get. She got one of her black banquet plastic tablecloths, set it up, and she talked to about maybe a dozen different people, had them just give her titles of, potential titles of things. And I gave her some really weird ones. Then she wrote those titles on pieces of paper, put them in a bowl, mixed it up, set these objects out on the table. I'm sorry, the background is kind of freaking out. I don't understand why.
It's okay.
Set them out on a table, and then just randomly assigned a random title to each one. Then family came over for, I think it was like a Super Bowl game or something like that, and she asked for responses, and just recorded highlights of responses, and some of her family and neighbors would say things like, "This is why I think art is a waste of time," and other people would say, "Oh, this is so perfect for an election cycle. This fits right in. This is amazing. You put so much thought into this." And her daughter was so excited because she said, "Mom, you finally got what art was about." And then when she revealed what she had done to her daughter got angry and wouldn't speak to her for 2 days.
Oh no.
I thought, but she's in the process of validating her own perspective on how useless conceptual art was. She created a conceptual art piece that was really well done. Now
That's so
this is,
fun.
I like what this person has done because they've made, using filters and stuff like that, they've made a new thing. And I think that this is fascinating. The only thing that is needed here is this needs to be in 3 paragraphs.
Okay.
But I think this right here, they've done a good job. I like that presentation. Okay, now we're going to be talking about the wrapped cocoon. This is the first thing that somebody turned in. I like what they've said. I think the idea is really good, but this does not fit the assignment. For this is more of a ready-made kind of piece. And the reason I say that is because the wrapping is supposed to change the contours of the object, and that has not happened. You can still see the contours of the object. For this person, what I would recommend is to get some more beads, wrap each of these things up so they're completely cocooned with only like one leg sticking out here, one thing sticking out here, a base sticking out here, and then set them up in this suspension. That would do it. And the reason is because the parameters of the assignment, you need to physically alter the silhouette of the object.
Okay.
So I think what she says about the work is really valid, but that's what needs to happen for the parameters of the assignment to be met. And we'll look at this more next week as well. Yeah, I think that was the first turn in. So excellent to her. And that was in the discussion area. Now this one is a cocooned object, and this is shown separate from the write-up about it. What I like about this is that it does fundamentally change the silhouette of the object. It does change it. Now, I think if we look at it, we could probably guess that this is going to be like a guitar, but that takes a lot of thinking. What they've done is they've wrapped it with these strips of cloth to the point, and it's made it so that the wrapping is really kind of interesting. That's something that I think is really fascinating. It's worth looking at Jean-Claude and Christo, how they design stuff, because they would do a series of watercolor paintings before ever wrapping something. And during those course of paintings, that's how they decided the color of the plastic that they would use. That's where they decided how the rope would be wrapped around it, where the different thicknesses of rope would be applied and tied into place, what color the rope would be. They decided all that as they were doing the sketches and the paintings. Did you know that about them,
I
Jean-Claude and
didn't.
Christo? And
That's
it was,
interesting.
so I give a link to their website in the background on the artist. Check that out, look at it,
I will.
explore it. It's just absolutely fascinating. Like when they would wrap cans of paint, he would try different ways of making the canvas more supple or more rigid, and then different ways of does it look better if he wraps it end to end, if he wraps it horizontally, if he does a combination. They tried lots of different things like that. And this person is fits the parameters of the assignment because they are changing the silhouette of the form. See that? And you can't see the actual instrument that's behind it. I like that. That works. All right. Any questions about any of the stuff that we've looked at?
I don't think so.
Okay. Again, I want to reiterate for everybody. Let's make sure that you get your self-critique and peer critique filmed and turned in by the end of Thanksgiving weekend for extra credit. And we will go over that unless if you want to stay for a couple minutes, we'll talk about that. But Otherwise, we'll go over it more intensely next week. And I think before we wind up today, I will just say there's four tools that you need to address in your peer and self-critique. One is describe, analyze. Third is interpret, and the last is evaluate. And watch the example that I link to in there. And we'll go over that next week. I've already done 3 weeks ago I did, or two, yeah, I think it was 3 weeks ago, I did a example critique of a random object. And somebody in the class has already turned something in, and, look at that, an example. But it should not be shorter than 3 minutes, and it shouldn't be more than 5 minutes.
Okay.
All
Is the
right?
best way to do that to get the picture of the assignment up on the screen and then record through Teams
I would say
to get
that's
your
the easiest
voice,
way to do
or
it. Yeah. Because Teams will save it as, I believe, an MP4 automatically, and
okay,
that's exactly right. So do a Teams call to yourself, do a screen share showing the object, then start the recording,
okay,
and then just describe it, talk about its color, shape, size, whatever you can think of to describe the physical parameters of the object. Analyze it, make at least 3 observations about how it possibly was made. The third, interpret, talk about why you think the artist used things, what it makes you think of yourself, and what it could possibly mean as an object. And then the last one, the fourth, when you evaluate it, talk about whether it was successful, if it's successful to you, if it's successful on the whole. And at that point, if and just describe why you think it's successful in those different parameters. What value does it have? That's where you evaluate. And if you make a couple, 2 to 3 observations at least for each of those 4, that will take you to 2.5 minutes easily. And if you go in depth a little bit on the description and analysis, that will carry you out. And even talk about why you're into, what are the triggers in your own background that make you believe that this means a certain way thing that it does. That will take it to 4 minutes pretty easily. Does that make sense?
yes.
All right, excellent. All right, well, that's all I have for today. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful weekend, and I look forward to seeing you again on Wednesday.
Thanks so much. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.